So in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the Omega Enlarger to do your enlargements. And with the Omega Enlarger, we're going to be using a couple of things that you haven't used before. First of all, we are going to be inserting filters this time, and you're going to be using these two things here, the easel and the grain focuser. So once you have taken a good look at your contact sheet, and maybe you've shared this with some of your classmates to get feedback and your teacher to get feedback, but once you've determined which two you're going to enlarge, you're also going to determine what your contrast should be set at before you go to do your test strip, because that's important to have that already set when you're making your test strip. All right, so once you have figured out that information, you're then going to take your film and your photo paper into the darkroom. Now your film and getting everything set up, you're going to take your film, whatever film strip has the picture on it that you're going to enlarge, you're going to take that out of the sleeve. Again, hold your film by the edges so you don't get your fingerprints all over it. And we're going to this time put this actually in the enlarger. Okay, so if you look on the enlarger on the left side over here, there is a handle that on the Omega, when you pull that handle towards you, see how that opens up the enlarger head. Okay, and there is back here a little kind of peg that arm rests on. Sometimes you have to push that arm in a little bit for it to rest on the peg. Okay, but that will kind of sit on that and hold the enlarger head open for you. And then you can take this out. This is the negative carrier. This is what's going to hold the negative into the enlarger when you actually go to do your enlargement. So as I open this up, you'll see there's 4 little silver pins inside there, and that's going to help hold your film in place. So I have my film holding it by the edges. Remember, the film has one side that is really shiny and glossy, and the other side is kind of a dull matte. So we want the shiny glossy side facing up, and I'm just going to slide this over under the silver pins, slide it over to whichever picture I decided I'm going to enlarge. Okay, now you can hold that up to the light to be able to make sure that it's lined up just right, and then you close that down, and that's going to go back into the enlarger. Now if you look right here, before I put it back in there, there are 2 little notches at the top, and these are kind of taped together because the hinges on many of them have bent, and the duct tape works just as well. So a lot of those are taped together at the top. But there are 2 little notches here that when you put this into the enlarger, there are, you'll notice inside there are 2 little silver pins, okay? And they don't stick up very high, but that little silver pin in there, okay, and there's one on both sides. So when we put this in here, the negative carrier is going to slide back, and you're just going to put that in there until those 2 little pins fit into those notches, okay? Basically, as long as this is kind of square with the bottom plate that this sits on, okay, so you can see my front edge is even and my sides are even on both sides, then it's in there all the way and it's straight. It's important that it's in there all the way and it's straight, otherwise you're going to end up with one side of your photo that is lighter compared to the rest of it, so that means that needs to be repositioned. Okay, so once that is in there, we'll close that down. Now you'll notice I haven't turned on the light yet. The Omega enlargers don't put out as much light as the Bessler enlargers do, but if I turn that on, you'll notice, you know, there is some light that comes out there. So it's best to do this part without the light on so that you're not exposing anybody else's paper. If somebody is behind you with some of their photo paper out, or if you have photo paper sitting off to the side, you might expose that to some of the light, okay? So I don't have the light on at this point. But once I have that in there, I can close that down, and then I can turn the light on. So I'm going to push the focus button to turn the light on, and then I can get those 5 things set up. Okay, so we have the height and the focus. Remember, the height and the focus on the Omega is over here on the right side. Okay, the knob that you turn towards you, loosen it, okay, and you can raise or lower it depending on what you need to do, and your focus here. Okay, now I'm going to set these things up without the red filter in there because that just makes it easier to see the light. And now your image is actually being projected through the lens and down onto the easel here. Okay, so this is the easel. This is what's going to hold your photo paper for doing your enlargement. This space is for a 5x7, and then you have some smaller pictures if you would ever want to do some smaller pictures for yourself. And the other side you can actually use to make an 8x10 if you would ever want to do an 8x10 for yourself. Okay, but for your assignments, for your projects in here, you're going to be using the 5x7 space, okay, and your 5x7 paper. This opens up, and you'll notice that inside there are little pegs. I'll get to these when we actually go to do the exposure. But there are two little pegs that will hold your paper in place, so it's just positioned just right in that opening. And then that closes down. So it holds your paper flat, and it also gives you a nice white border around your image because it's actually covering up about 1/4 of an inch all the way around of your photo paper, okay? But you're gonna have this out. Once you turn on your light, you'll be able to see your image, actual image projected in this area. So you will line it up under there so that your image is centered in there, and you'll adjust the height so that your image is filling up this 5x7 space, and it should actually go at least a little bit out onto the black part of the easel because we don't want the edge of the photo showing at all within this space. We want it completely filling up this space. So adjust your height as necessary to make sure your image is filling up that space. And then for your focus, you can adjust your focus just by looking at your image there being projected on the easel. Now you can't see my image. I do have it on and I do have my negative in there, but because of the light on my phone for the video, you can't see it, unfortunately. But as I turn this, I am adjusting the focus of my picture, okay? And I can just, just by looking at it, you'll be able to see your image and you'll be able to focus it as best you can, just from there, just by looking at it here. And then you're going to double check it with this. This is called a grain focuser. You're going to put this right down on the easel where your photo paper is actually going to go. Okay, so and again, there's no photo paper out here, so it's just going to sit where the photo paper sits. And then you will look through the magnifier. It has a little magnifier here and a little mirror right here. So basically what's happening is your image being projected through the lens is going down to the mirror, and a portion of your picture is then being reflected off of the mirror and up through the magnifier. So as you lean over and look through this, you will have your hand up here in the focus dial, and you will turn that just a little bit either way and you want to turn it slowly, okay, because you want to see that grain come into focus. Now, what is the grain? The grain is basically all the little tiny dots that make up your image. So if you think of like a digital image being made up of pixels, this is kind of the same thing, but it's made up of a bunch of little tiny gray and black dots. So that is the grain, and when you're looking through this, sometimes you see something that's recognizable, sometimes you don't. It just depends on your picture, it depends on where this is positioned, and if it's positioned in a place where you'll see something that's recognizable. So basically you're just going to look through there and look for the grain. The grain kind of looks like gray sand. It's going to look very gritty. Like I said, just kind of gray dots, gray specks really. So you want to get that in the best focus possible. Now this is only going to focus it as much as it was focused when you took the picture. So if you took the picture out of focus, it can't fix that. Okay, it's only going to get it in the best focus that it was taken in. All right, so you do want to check that with this to make sure it is the best it can be. And then the next setting is your aperture. So again, down here on the lens, we have that little white dot. This time we want to set it to 5.6. Okay, so you can use the home screen light of your phone, not your flashlight, but the home screen light to kind of illuminate that. But basically, if you start with it at the brightest setting, which as you know is 3.5, you're just going to basically go in 2 more clicks to 5.6. The light gets a little bit dimmer. Okay, and that's because the enlarger is a little bit closer. So based on the height of the enlarger, 5.6 typically works perfect. Okay, so 5.6 on the aperture. And then on the timer, we want 2.0, okay? 2.0 will be best for the test strip. And you're going to, for the last thing, you're going to be inserting a filter into the enlarger. So for the filter, again, you're gonna look at your picture to determine, before you get in here, how much contrast you might need to add. So on the Omega, you're going to take out this little tray, and again, this is also best to do without the light on, because you can see that's letting light out as well. So if you haven't inserted the filter yet, I would go ahead and turn the light off, and then you can pull that little tray out. Okay, so if we determine, let's say we determine your filter or your contrast should be set at level 3. So on the Omega Enlargers, we have these little filters that you insert yourself into those. These are on in the little set of plastic drawers on our desk outside in the classroom. So you'll see a little tiny set of drawers that say contrast filters, and there's a drawer for number 3, number 4, number 5, because typically we are increasing contrast and not decreasing it. Okay, so typically the 3 is, if you have pretty good contrast and you just want to add a little bit. The 4 is if you're kind of low in contrast, and the 5 is if you're really low in contrast. All right, now on this tray, you'll notice there are 2 little tabs. Okay, right where my fingers are, there's a little tab here and a little tab here that the filter can get tucked under. And by the way, you can tell the filters are labeled with the number. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck that under the tab there and under the tab there. And notice that doesn't really lay flat, and that's okay because it's a solid, color. So it's not going to, distort anything because it's not laying flat, because it's solid. So all you have to do is pop that in and then replace that tray in the enlarger. And then once we turn the light back on, you'll notice that your image will look kind of pink here. And that's normal, it's supposed to look that way. You do still need to put the red filter under there, okay, to protect the film, but that pink will add contrast to your photo. And you do want to make sure you have that in for the actual test strip, because if you don't have contrast, you don't have a filter inserted, and you go to do your test strip, if it comes out and it looks really gray, we're going to have you go back in with a filter, add the filter in, and then do a new test strip, because that does change the exposure time. So it's kind of hard to guess what your time should be when we have to add a filter in there. Okay, so make sure that's inserted when you go to do your actual test strip. So once we have those 5 things set, we have the height and focus, we have the aperture, time, and a filter inserted. Then we are ready to do the actual exposure. So in the next video, we will set up to do that.